The cry across the stars. Morning light of Lumina's twin suns painted the crystal gardens in shades of gold and amber. Dr. Lyra, Moon Whisper, moved gracefully between the towering formations, her silver hair catching the light as she tended to the healing crystals. The Zephyrians had cultivated these gardens for over 1,000 years, using the crystal's natural energy to heal both body and spirit. Peace had reigned on their world for so long that weapons were found only in museums. Lyra paused at her favorite crystal, a massive blue formation that hummed with gentle energy. She placed her delicate hands on its surface, feeling the vibrations that helped injured beings from across the galaxy. The Zephyrians had become known throughout the cosmos as the greatest healers, welcoming all who needed their help. Their planet served as a neutral ground where even warring species could find sanctuary. The first sign of trouble came as a shadow fell across the gardens. Lyra looked up to see ships descending from the sky, massive and angular, their dark hulls reflecting no light. These were not the sleek vessels of traders or the comfortable transports of patients seeking healing. These ships carried the marks of war in the planetary communication center. Young Zephyrian operator Teal Starweaver stared at his instruments in growing alarm. The approaching fleet consisted of over 300 warships, all bearing the feared symbol of the Shadowclaw Empire. He had heard whispers of this ruthless civilization that swept across the outer rim, conquering peaceful worlds and enslaving their populations. The largest ship opened communication channels, and a harsh voice filled the center. Inhabitants of Lumina, you now belong to the Shadowclaw Empire. Surrender immediately or face total annihilation. You have 1 hour to comply. Teal's hand shook as he activated the emergency broadcast system. Across Lumina, sirens began to wail for the first time in centuries. The Zephyrians had no military, no weapons, no way to defend themselves. They were healers, not warriors. Warlord Krex stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devastator, watching the peaceful world below. The Shadowclaw leader was a massive being, his scales black as space itself, his eyes glowing red with cruel satisfaction. He had conquered 47 worlds in the past decade, and each victory made him hunger for more. Sir, his lieutenant reported, we're detecting no military installations, no defense platforms, no armed vessels. They're completely defenseless. Krex smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Perfect. Begin the harvest. I want their healing, technology and their crystal formations. As for the population, process them for the slave markets. These gentle creatures will fetch good prices. The invasion began with surgical precision. Shadowclaw dropships descended on major cities while orbital bombardment platforms targeted any structure that might serve as a command center. The Zephyrians fled in panic, their crystalline cities beautiful but utterly defenseless against military assault. Dr. Lyra found herself running through the streets of her home city, helping injured civilians while trying to reach the medical center. Everywhere she looked, she saw her people being rounded up by Shadowclaw soldiers. The invaders showed no mercy, using shock weapons to subdue anyone who moved too slowly at the communication center. Teal made a desperate decision. The Zephyrians kept detailed records of all species they had helped over the centuries. Somewhere in the galaxy, there had to be someone who would answer their call for help. His fingers flew over the controls as he composed a message in the universal distress format. This is Lumina, homeworld of the Zephyrians, transmitting on all emergency frequencies. We are under attack by the Shadowclaw Empire. Our people are being enslaved, and our world is being destroyed. We have no military capability and cannot defend ourselves. We have spent centuries healing the wounded and offering sanctuary to all species. If anyone can hear this message, please help us. We are dying." The message burst out from Lumina at light speed, racing across the galaxy on hundreds of different frequencies. Teal knew the chances of reaching anyone willing and able to help were slim, but he had to try. As Shadowclaw soldiers broke down the door to his communication center, he kept transmitting, determined to send the message until his last breath, 3,000 light-years away. In the Sol system, Lieutenant Marcus Chen was monitoring routine communications aboard the UES Thunderstrike when the desperate message reached Earth's listening posts. The young officer had been tracking shipping routes and trade communications, but this distress call made him sit up straight in his chair. He listened to the message twice, then immediately contacted his commanding officer. Commander Alina Rodriguez was reviewing tactical reports when Chun's urgent call came through. "Commander, you need to hear this immediately," Chun said, his voice tight with concern. Rodriguez listened to the Zephyrian distress call, her expression growing darker with each word. She had served in the Human Defense Force for 20 years and had seen the aftermath of Shadowclaw attacks before. They were a plague on the galaxy, destroying everything beautiful and peaceful in their path. "How long ago was this transmitted?" she asked. "The signal originated 47 hours ago, ma'am. At light speed, it just reached us." Rodriguez was already moving toward the bridge. "Alert all ships in the 3rd Expeditionary Fleet. Emergency deployment. Maximum burn to these coordinates." She paused at the bridge entrance. "And Chen, send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we have a code black situation and request immediate reinforcement." The 3rd Human Expeditionary Fleet consisted of 18 ships, including the heavy cruiser Thunderstrike, 6 destroyers, 8 frigates, and 3 support vessels. It was not the largest fleet in human space, but it was one of the most experienced, having fought pirates and slavers across the outer systems for the past 5 years as the human ships changed course toward Lumina. Their crews prepared for battle with the efficiency born of long experience. In the weapons bays, Marines checked their gear and loaded ammunition. In engineering, technicians pushed the reactors to maximum output. On the bridge of each ship, officers studied everything known about Shadowclaw tactics and capabilities. Commander Rodriguez stood in her ready room, looking at the tactical display showing the distance to Lumina. Even at maximum speed, they would need 72 hours to reach the Zephyrian homeworld. She could only hope they would not be too late. Back on Lumina, the situation was growing worse by the hour. Shadowclaw soldiers had established processing centers in every major city, sorting captured Zephyrians by age, health, and skill. The elderly and infirm were being executed, while the young and healthy were prepared for transport to slave markets. The Shadowclaws had perfected this process on dozens of worlds. Dr. Lyra found herself herded into a massive holding area with thousands of other Zephyrians. The crystalline walls that had once resonated with healing energy now echoed with the cries of the frightened and the dying. Shadowclaw guards walked among the prisoners, selecting individuals for various fates. A young Zephyrian mother clutched her child close to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "What did we do wrong?" she whispered to Lyra. "We never hurt anyone. We only tried to help." Lyra felt rage building in her chest, an emotion she had rarely experienced in her peaceful life. The Zephyrians had dedicated themselves to healing and helping others, only to be repaid with slavery and death. If there was any justice in the universe, someone would hear their call for help. In the Shadowclaw Command Center, Warlord Krex reviewed the progress of his conquest. The harvest was proceeding ahead of schedule. The Zephorian healing crystals were being loaded onto cargo ships, while the most valuable prisoners were being prepared for transport. In another few days, there would be nothing left of Zephorian civilization but memories. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we've detected unusual energy signatures at the edge of the system." Krex barely looked up from his displays. "Probably refugee ships trying to escape. Destroy them." "Actually, sir, the signatures don't match any known Zephorian technology. The energy patterns suggest military-grade propulsion systems." This got Krex's attention. He activated the long-range sensors and studied the approaching contacts. 18 ships, moving at high speed directly toward Lumina. Their configuration was unfamiliar, but they were clearly warships. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. "Approximately 6 hours, sir." Krex smiled coldly. "Signal the fleet. We'll give these newcomers a proper welcome." 300 ships against 18 fools. This will be over quickly. But as the human fleet approached Lumina, something extraordinary was happening throughout the galaxy. The Zephorian distress call had been picked up by dozens of species, and word was spreading about the attack on the famous healers. While most civilizations were too far away or too weak to help, the message had touched something deep in the galactic consciousness. The Zephorians had helped everyone. Their hospitals had treated soldiers from 100 different wars. Their healers had worked tirelessly to save lives regardless of species or politics. They had asked for nothing in return except the chance to heal and help. Now, in their darkest hour, they had sent out a desperate plea for salvation. Within minutes, the camp's defenses were shattered. Shadowclaw soldiers fled in panic, abandoning their posts and their prisoners. The human marines moved through the camp with practiced efficiency, cutting down guards and freeing captives. Dr. Lyra found herself face to face with a human marine, his armor scarred by battle but his eyes kind. "Dr. Moonwhisper," he asked, in accented galactic standard. "Yes, I am she," Lyra replied, amazed that he knew her name. "Sergeant Morrison, Earth Defense Force," he said, removing his helmet to reveal a weathered face marked by years of combat. "We received your distress call. We're here to get you home." Tears streamed down Lyra's face. "You came. You actually came, ma'am," Morrison said gently. "Humans don't abandon friends. And anyone who spends their life healing others is a friend of humanity." Across the camp, similar scenes were playing out. Human Marines were not only freeing prisoners, but providing medical aid to the wounded and traumatized. They worked with the efficiency of professional soldiers, but the compassion of people who understood the value of innocent life in space. The battle was reaching its climax. The combined human fleets had destroyed over half the Shadowclaw armada, but Warlord Krex was making one final, desperate gambit. He was ordering his remaining ships to bombard the planet's surface, hoping to destroy the humans' rescue mission and salvage some victory from the disaster. Commander Rodriguez saw the threat immediately. "All ships, intercept those bombardment platforms. We can't let them target the planet." The human fleet moved to block the orbital bombardment, but several Shadowclaw ships managed to break through. Energy beams lanced down toward the surface, targeting the areas where human Marines were evacuating prisoners. On the ground, Sergeant Morrison saw the incoming fire and made a split-second decision. "All units, defensive positions. Protect the civilians." The The human marines formed a protective barrier around the fleeing Zephyrians, using their own bodies as shields. Energy bolts that should have killed hundreds of refugees instead struck human armor and battle-tested defenders. Some marines fell, but their sacrifice bought time for the civilians to reach safety. In space, Admiral Thompson watched the display with growing fury. The Shadow Claws were targeting refugee evacuation sites, a violation of every civilized law. Of war, she activated her fleet communication system with deadly calm. All ships, weapons free. Show them what happens when you target civilians. Leave none alive. The human fleet's response was swift and merciless. The remaining Shadow Claw ships found themselves under attack from weapons that seemed to strike from every direction at once. Human tactics, developed through millennia of warfare on a deadly world, proved superior to the Shadow Claw's simple brutality. Warlord Krex watched his empire's fleet die around him. Ship after ship exploded under human fire, their crews screaming final messages before their ships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. In less than an hour, a force of 300 warships had been reduced to burning wreckage. "Sir," Captain Nightfang reported, her voice shaking, "we've lost 260 ships. Only 40 vessels remain capable of fighting." Krex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His mighty fleet, which had conquered dozens of worlds, had been shattered by a force 1/7 its size. These humans fought like demons, showing no mercy to those who threatened the innocent. "Signal the remaining ships," he commanded. "Full retreat. We're withdrawing from this system." As the surviving Shadowclaw ships fled toward hyperspace, the human fleets held their fire. They had accomplished their mission. The Zephyrians were safe, and the invaders were driven off. But the message was clear. Anyone who threatened peaceful peoples would face the full fury of humanity. On the surface of Lumina, Dr. Lyra walked through the ruins of her city with Sergeant Morrison. The beautiful crystal gardens were scarred by weapon fire, and many buildings lay in ruins. But her people were alive, and that was what mattered most. "How can we ever repay you?" she asked the human marine. Morrison smiled, his weathered face softening. "Doc, you've spent your whole life healing people. You've saved thousands of lives, from dozens of species. As far as humanity is concerned, we owe you. But your people died to save us," Lyra protested. "I saw your Marines sacrifice themselves to protect my people." "That's what we do," Morrison replied simply. "We protect those who can't protect themselves. It's who we are." High above the planet, the human fleets maintained their protective positions. Admiral Thompson had received word that other human forces were en route to establish a permanent defense station in the system. The Zephyrians would never again face invasion alone. In the weeks that followed, the story of the Battle of Lumina spread across the galaxy. The peaceful Zephyrians had sent out a desperate call for help, and the humans had answered with everything. They had. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly knew the name of the Death World, whose children protected the innocent. Dr. Lyra established a new healing center in the ruins of her city, but this time it was different. Human engineers helped design defenses that could protect the patients and healers. Human Marines provided security, ensuring that no one would ever again threaten those who dedicated their lives to healing. The partnership between humanity and the Zephyrians became legendary. The gentle healers provided medical care to human colonies, while the human military protected Zephyrian worlds and installations. It was a relationship built on mutual respect and shared values. Years later, when other species asked the Zephyrians about humanity, Dr. Lyra would always tell the same story. She would speak of the day when her people faced extinction, when they had no hope left, when they sent a desperate message into the void. We called for help, she would say, and they came. Not because they had to, not because they were paid, but because they believed that the innocent deserved protection. That is who the humans are. That is why we trust them with our lives. The galaxy learned that day that humanity was not just another species seeking profit or territory. They were the children of a death world who had learned that strength meant nothing without compassion, that power was meaningless unless used to protect those who could not protect themselves. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, other peaceful species took comfort in knowing that if they ever faced extinction, if they ever needed help, they could send a message into the void and trust that the humans would answer. The children of Earth had become the guardians of the galaxy's gentle peoples, and that was a responsibility they embraced with pride. Asterisk.